The gymnasium was packed that night, brighter and louder than it had been in years. The whole town had gathered, filling every seat and corner, some even standing by the walls because they refused to miss this game. The annual basketball championship was not just a school event, it was a tradition that pulled the community together like nothing else could. Neighbors who rarely spoke during the year sat side by side, old friends reunited, and parents carried toddlers on their shoulders just to get a glimpse of the court. The atmosphere was alive, the kind of energy that made even those who didn't know much about basketball feel as if they had been lifelong fans. Among the players, one name echoed louder than the rest: Ethan. He was the star of his high school team, the boy everyone counted on when the game got tough. For years, his dedication had been unmatched. He was the first to arrive at practice and the last to leave. His coaches admired his focus, his teammates trusted him completely, and the townspeople admired his determination. Ethan wasn't just a skilled shooter, he carried a kind of confidence that spread to everyone around him. People often said he had been born for this moment, that his hands were meant to hold the ball in the final seconds of a game like this. Across the court stood Ryan, his rival. Ryan was every bit as talented as Ethan, though he often played in Ethan's shadow. He was quick on his feet, smart with his plays, and relentless in defense. The two boys had faced each other countless times, pushing each other harder with every season. Their rivalry was the kind that made games unforgettable, because neither ever wanted to lose to the other. Some saw it as a battle of skill, others as a clash of pride, but deep down, both boys knew they had shaped each other into the players they had become. Without Ryan, Ethan might never have pushed himself so hard, and without Ethan, Ryan might never have sharpened his talent to its edge. The championship night had been close from the start. The scoreboard kept flipping back and forth, each team fighting for every basket, each player giving everything they had. The sound of sneakers squeaking against the polished wood floor mixed with the roar of the crowd, creating a rhythm that seemed to shake the very building. Parents shouted encouragement, cheerleaders jumped and clapped in rhythm, and students waved handmade posters high above their heads. It was more than just a game, it was pride, history, and a chance for one team to bring the trophy back home. Ethan's team played with fierce determination, and each time he touched the ball, the crowd leaned forward, holding their breath. He made difficult shots look easy, weaving through defenders, landing three-pointers with precision, and keeping his teammates motivated with quick words of encouragement. But Ryan was no less impressive. He stole passes, blocked shots, and landed baskets of his own that made his fans leap to their feet. The rivalry was alive in every play, and the energy in the gym only grew stronger with every passing minute. As the game moved closer to its final moments, the score tightened. There was no room for error, no time to relax. The coaches shouted strategies from the sidelines, the referees blew their whistles sharply, and the players on the benches clutched towels in nervous anticipation. Every second felt heavy, every possession of the ball seemed like it carried the weight of the entire town's expectations. The tension was so thick that even those who usually stayed quiet during games found themselves shouting, cheering, or groaning at every turn. Then came the final minute, the moment everyone had been waiting for. The scoreboard showed a tie, and the ball found its way to Ethan's hands. Time seemed to slow as he dribbled up the court. His eyes scanned the defenders, his heartbeat matched the rhythm of the bouncing ball, and the crowd's roar blurred into a distant hum. Everyone knew what was about to happen. This was the moment Ethan had trained for his whole life, the moment that would write his name into the history of the town's championships. People believed they were about to witness the winning shot, the kind of shot that would be talked about for years. But while Ethan was preparing, he noticed something strange on the other side of the court. Ryan, his rival, had stumbled. At first, Ethan thought it was just part of the game, maybe Ryan had slipped while trying to defend. But as the ball continued bouncing in his hands, his eyes fixed on Ryan again, and this time he realized something was wrong. Ryan wasn't just slipping, he was collapsing. The crowd hadn't noticed yet. Their eyes were on Ethan, waiting for him to make the shot that would decide everything. His teammates were shouting for him to go, to take the open chance, to end the game. But Ethan's focus wasn't on the hoop anymore. His heart pounded harder, a wave of confusion crashing over him. In those seconds, he faced a choice that no one could have prepared him for. The clock ticked down, and the ball was still in Ethan's hands. All his years of practice, all the sweat and dedication, all the expectations of his team and town pressed against him. He could win the game right then and there. One clean shot and he would be the hero. Yet, in the corner of his vision, Ryan was on the floor, motionless. Something inside Ethan told him that this was bigger than basketball, bigger than trophies, bigger than pride. The gymnasium, filled with cheers and noise just moments earlier, seemed strangely distant in that instant. It felt as if Ethan and Ryan were the only two people on the court. Time was slipping away, and with it, the chance for victory. But victory didn't feel as important anymore. Ethan's instincts, his humanity, and his heart were pulling him in a different direction. The crowd didn't know yet what Ethan was about to do. They thought they were waiting for a winning shot, but Ethan was holding something far more valuable than the ball. He was holding a decision that would not only change the outcome of the game but would also shape how the town saw him forever. The ball was still in Ethan's hands, and the clock above the scoreboard showed only a few seconds left. The crowd was shouting louder than ever, urging him to make the winning shot. His teammates were calling his name, pointing toward the hoop, waving their arms in excitement. To them, this was the perfect chance to end the game and win the championship. They had worked all season for this, and now the final moment had arrived. But Ethan's eyes were not on the basket. His focus had shifted to Ryan, lying on the court. Ryan's collapse had gone unnoticed by most. Some people thought he had fallen after trying to block Ethan, while others assumed he would stand up quickly. But Ethan could see from where he stood that this was not normal. Ryan was struggling, his movements weak, his body trembling slightly as if he was trying to breathe but couldn't find enough air. Ethan's mind raced. He remembered all the stories of athletes who pushed their bodies too hard, who fainted in the middle of the game, and he felt a wave of fear rush through him. The noise around him seemed far away, like echoes in a tunnel. He could hear the pounding of his own heart louder than the shouts of the crowd. His hands tightened around the ball, but instead of lifting it to take the shot, he froze. It was as if two paths opened in front of him, one leading to the basket, to glory, and to the cheering of the entire town, and the other leading to Ryan, his rival, who clearly needed help. For a brief second, Ethan imagined what would happen if he made the shot. The scoreboard would flash victory, his teammates would lift him on their shoulders, and his name would be remembered as the one who brought home the championship. The crowd would celebrate for weeks, and people would retell the story of how Ethan won the game in the final seconds. But then his eyes went back to Ryan, and that vision faded. Winning suddenly felt meaningless if it came at the cost of ignoring someone who was suffering right in front of him. The clock ticked down, and the gym erupted in confusion when Ethan suddenly stopped dribbling. Instead of moving toward the hoop, he dropped the ball and sprinted toward Ryan. A gasp spread through the crowd as people realized something was happening, something no one had expected. Coaches jumped from their benches, the referee blew his whistle, and the players looked around in shock. The game was still on, but Ethan had abandoned the play. He knelt by Ryan's side, his hands trembling as he touched his rival's shoulder. "Ryan! Can you hear me?" Ethan shouted, but there was no clear response. Ryan's breathing was shallow, his eyes half closed. Panic filled Ethan's chest, but he fought to stay calm. He waved toward the sideline, shouting for help. The medic rushed forward, but those first few seconds felt endless. Ethan supported Ryan's head gently, speaking to him, trying to keep him conscious. "Stay with me, you're going to be okay. Help is coming." The crowd had fallen into a stunned silence. The loud cheers had vanished, replaced by whispers and worried murmurs. Parents stood from their seats, hands over their mouths. Students lowered their posters, their excitement replaced with concern. Even the players on both teams forgot the game, gathering at a distance, watching in disbelief as the star of the night chose to leave the ball behind to help his fallen rival. The referee finally stopped the clock, and the medics took over. They checked Ryan quickly, asking him questions, placing an oxygen mask over his face. Ethan stayed close, unwilling to leave until he was sure Ryan was in safe hands. His teammates called out to him, some confused, some frustrated, but Ethan didn't look back. His decision was made, and nothing in the world could make him regret it. When the final buzzer sounded, no one cheered. The other team technically won, since Ethan's side had failed to make the last shot. But the usual celebrations that followed a championship were missing. Instead, all eyes were on the boy who gave up victory to kneel beside his rival. The trophy, the scoreboard, the game, they all seemed so small compared to the scene unfolding on the court. As Ryan was lifted onto a stretcher and carried out, the crowd began clapping. At first, it was soft, uncertain, but soon it grew louder, spreading through the gym like a wave. They weren't clapping for the team that won the trophy. They were clapping for Ethan, for the courage it took to make a choice that went against the expectations of everyone in the room. The sound filled the gym, echoing in every corner, as Ethan stood watching the stretcher disappear through the doors. Later that night, when Ethan left the gym, the weight of the evening pressed down on him. His teammates were divided, some angry that he had cost them the game, others quietly proud of what he had done. The coach patted him on the shoulder, whispering words of understanding. Ethan walked home slowly, his thoughts heavy, but deep inside, he felt a strange peace. He knew he had done the right thing. Winning could wait, but helping Ryan in that moment had been far more important. That night, the town couldn't stop talking about it. At diners, in living rooms, and across social media, people replayed the moment again and again. Some were shocked, others deeply moved, but no one could deny that Ethan's choice had changed the story of the night forever. He had gone from being the boy expected to hit the winning shot to being the boy who showed everyone what true sportsmanship looked like. The gym was still buzzing with confusion as Ethan remained kneeling beside Ryan. The ball rolled away to the side of the court, forgotten. Coaches shouted, players looked around helplessly, and the referee's whistle echoed again and again, but none of it mattered anymore. In that moment, it was no longer a game. It was a race against time, and Ethan had already made his choice. Ryan's face was pale, his breath shallow, his body unsteady. Ethan leaned closer, speaking softly but firmly, trying to keep him awake. "Stay with me, Ryan. Don't close your eyes. Help is on the way." His hands trembled, but his voice carried determination. He had faced pressure before, crowds screaming, defenders chasing him, the ball in his hands with seconds left on the clock, but nothing had ever felt as heavy as this moment. When the medic reached them, Ethan quickly explained what he had seen. The medic knelt, checked Ryan's pulse, and began giving instructions to others. Players from both teams gathered around, their earlier rivalry forgotten. The gym, which had been full of roaring voices just a minute earlier, now felt like it was holding its breath. People leaned forward in silence, their eyes locked on the scene at the center of the court. Parents whispered prayers, students covered their mouths in shock, and teachers who had cheered from the stands now stood frozen, unsure what to do. The game clock had stopped, but in Ethan's mind, time seemed to move slower than ever. He kept speaking to Ryan, refusing to let fear take over. His rival's eyes flickered open, then shut again, and Ethan felt his heart squeeze painfully. "You're strong, Ryan. You can get through this. Just keep fighting." The medics worked quickly, asking for more space, and players stepped back to give them room. They lifted Ryan carefully onto a stretcher, securing him as they prepared to carry him out. Ethan stayed beside him, walking a few steps as if he couldn't let go until he was certain Ryan was safe. Only when the stretcher disappeared through the gym doors did Ethan finally stand still, his hands falling to his sides. Behind him, the scoreboard still showed a tied game, but the final buzzer had already ended it. The championship was technically over. His team had lost because he had dropped the ball and left the play unfinished. The trophy was handed to the other team, but their victory felt hollow. No one cheered, no one danced with joy, and no one rushed to grab the trophy from the table. Instead, every eye in the gym turned to Ethan, the boy who had given up the winning shot. At first, he felt the weight of disappointment. He imagined his teammates angry with him, the town upset, the season wasted. His shoulders drooped as he walked toward the bench, unsure of what kind of looks he would face. But then something unexpected happened. A soft clap broke the silence. One person in the crowd began applauding. Then another. And another. Within seconds, the entire gym was filled with the sound of hands clapping, not for the winners of the game, but for Ethan. The sound echoed so loudly that Ethan froze. He had never heard applause like this before. It wasn't the usual celebration for a basket or a victory, it was different. It was respect. It was gratitude. It was recognition of something greater than basketball. Ethan blinked, his chest tightening as he realized that people understood what he had done. They weren't angry at him. They were proud. Some of his teammates approached him, their expressions mixed. A few were clearly disappointed about losing, their dreams of the championship slipping away. But others patted his back, nodded at him with small smiles, and whispered words like, "You did the right thing." Even the coach, who had been shouting instructions only minutes earlier, put a hand on Ethan's shoulder and said softly, "That took more courage than any shot you've ever taken." As Ethan left the gym that night, the cool night air hit his face, and he breathed deeply, trying to calm the storm of emotions inside him. He walked home slowly, his mind replaying everything that had happened. The image of Ryan collapsing, the decision to drop the ball, the silence of the crowd, and then the applause, it all felt unreal. He wondered what would happen next. Would Ryan recover? Would the town forgive him for losing the game? Would his teammates truly understand? He didn't have answers yet, but he knew in his heart that he couldn't have done anything differently. At home, his parents were waiting. His mother hugged him tightly the moment he walked through the door, tears in her eyes. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. His father, usually quiet and reserved, placed a firm hand on his shoulder and said, "That's what being a man is about, making the right choice, even when it's the hardest one." Ethan listened, feeling a warmth spread through him, though he still carried the weight of uncertainty. Meanwhile, across town, Ryan was in the hospital. Doctors ran tests, nurses monitored him closely, and his family stayed by his side. News spread quickly, everyone wanted updates about the boy who had collapsed and the rival who had helped him. People posted about it on social media, sharing videos from the game. One clip showed Ethan dropping the ball and running to Ryan's side, and it spread rapidly, drawing comments of admiration from people far beyond their small town. By the time Ethan went to bed that night, the story was already being retold in homes across the community. Some people spoke about the disappointment of losing the championship, but most talked about the moment Ethan chose compassion over victory. They described it as something bigger than basketball, a lesson that the entire town would remember. Ethan lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. He could still hear the sound of the crowd clapping in his ears, and it gave him a strange sense of peace. For the first time, he realized that true greatness wasn't about trophies or points on a scoreboard. It was about character, about doing what was right when it mattered most. And though he didn't know what the next morning would bring, he felt something deep inside him shift. The boy who had been known as the star player was now something different, something he couldn't quite put into words yet. The morning after the championship, the town woke up to a story that spread faster than anyone expected. In coffee shops, people leaned over their mugs to talk about what they had seen. In grocery stores, neighbors stopped each other in the aisles to share their thoughts. Even children walking to school were buzzing with conversations, repeating what their parents had told them the night before. Everyone had been waiting for a championship win, but what they witnessed instead had left a much deeper mark. Videos from the game began to appear online. One clip showed Ethan dribbling the ball, stopping suddenly, and then dropping it to rush toward Ryan. Another showed him kneeling, waving for help, while the rest of the players stood frozen. The clips were shared again and again until nearly every phone in town had the same images playing on their screens. Comments flooded in, not just from locals but from people in nearby towns who had heard about it. "That boy has a heart of gold. This is what true sportsmanship looks like. Winning means nothing if we forget to be human." By breakfast time, Ethan's name was everywhere. Teachers at the school praised his courage in front of their classes, parents told their children about the importance of kindness over competition, and even people who had never watched a single basketball game before spoke about how proud they were of what he had done. For the first time, Ethan realized that the story had grown beyond the gymnasium. It was no longer about one game or one trophy. It was about a choice that had touched the hearts of an entire community. Ethan, however, did not feel like a hero. He woke up slowly, his body still heavy from the stress of the night before. The sound of applause still echoed in his head, and yet he wondered how his teammates felt. Had they forgiven him? Or were they quietly angry that he had cost them the championship? The question swirled in his mind as he got dressed for school. He knew he couldn't avoid the stares or the whispers that were waiting for him. When he walked into the hallway that morning, everything fell silent for a brief moment. Students turned to look at him, some smiling warmly, others whispering to each other. He kept his eyes forward, his steps steady, though his heart raced. Then something unexpected happened. A student clapped. Then another. Soon the hallway was filled with applause, just like the gymnasium had been the night before. Ethan froze, his cheeks warming, unsure how to respond. It wasn't the applause of victory. It was applause of respect. And it was louder than any cheer he had ever received on the court. His teachers greeted him kindly, many of them placing a hand on his shoulder or offering quiet words of admiration. "You showed real character last night," one said. "That choice will stay with people longer than any championship." His classmates nodded, and even those who usually teased him about basketball seemed to look at him differently. It was as though, overnight, the way people saw him had completely changed. Meanwhile, Ryan's condition was improving. The doctors announced that he had suffered from exhaustion and dehydration, something that could have turned dangerous if he hadn't received help in time. His parents spoke to the local paper, expressing their gratitude for Ethan. "We'll never forget what he did for our son," Ryan's mother said, tears in her eyes. In that moment, he wasn't a rival. He was a lifesaver. Those words were printed in bold letters on the front page of the town's newspaper the next morning. At practice later that week, Ethan's teammates gathered around him. Some still carried disappointment about losing, but as they stood face to face with him, their feelings softened. One of them finally spoke, "We wanted that trophy, Ethan. We really did. But when I saw what you did, I realized the game didn't matter as much as we thought. You reminded us what's truly important." Slowly, others nodded in agreement. The frustration faded, replaced by a quiet pride in being part of a team led by someone who had chosen compassion. The coaches, too, made it clear that they stood behind Ethan. During a school assembly, the head coach addressed the students and parents in attendance. "Last night we may not have won the trophy, but we witnessed something greater. Ethan taught us that character is more important than points on a board. That lesson will stay with us longer than any victory. The gym, once again, filled with applause. Beyond the school, the town leaders also took notice. At the weekly town meeting, Ethan's name was brought up repeatedly. Some suggested honoring him with an award, others proposed writing about his act in the town's history archive. What surprised Ethan most was how many older residents admired him. Retired athletes, grandparents, and townspeople who had seen decades of championships said that they had never felt prouder of a young man in their community. For Ethan, all of this attention felt strange. He had never thought of himself as more than a basketball player who worked hard for his team. Now people looked at him as something different, as an example, a reminder of values they all cherished but sometimes forgot. He was humbled by their words, but he also felt a sense of responsibility. If people were going to see him differently, he wanted to live up to that trust. At night, Ethan sat with his parents at the dinner table, listening to them talk about the messages they had received from neighbors and friends. His mother smiled, saying, "You see, son, sometimes life gives you a moment where you have to choose between what is easy and what is right. You chose what is right. That's why people respect you." His father nodded in agreement, adding, "The town will remember this longer than they would have remembered a trophy." Ryan, still in the hospital but recovering well, heard the stories too. He asked his parents to let him see Ethan when he was strong enough. "I need to thank him," he said. "He gave up everything to help me. That's something I can never forget." Word of Ryan's gratitude spread, and it softened any remaining hearts that had been disappointed by the loss. Even those who had grumbled about the championship found themselves saying, "He did the right thing." By the end of the week, it was clear, the town didn't see Ethan as just a star player anymore. They saw him as a young man who had taught them all a lesson. He had reminded them that competition could be thrilling, but compassion was far greater. The conversations in the community shifted from who won or lost the game to what Ethan's choice meant for them as people. Parents began using his example to teach their children about kindness. Teachers spoke about him in classrooms, encouraging students to look out for one another. The whole town, in some way, felt changed. And through it all, Ethan remained humble. He never boasted, never claimed to be a hero. He simply said, "I did what anyone should do." But deep inside, he realized that this one choice had redefined who he was. The boy who had once been known only for his basketball skills was now known for something much greater. His heart. The days that followed were filled with conversations, not about the missed championship, but about the choice Ethan had made. The town seemed different, as if something had shifted in its spirit. People greeted each other with warmer smiles, teachers reminded their students about the importance of kindness, and parents told their children that being good mattered more than being first. It was as if Ethan's action had planted a seed in the hearts of everyone who had witnessed it, and now that seed was growing into something larger. Meanwhile, Ryan slowly regained his strength in the hospital. The first time he sat up without help, his parents cried with relief. When he was strong enough to talk more, his very first request was to see Ethan. Word spread quickly, and soon Ethan found himself standing nervously outside Ryan's hospital room. He knocked softly before entering, unsure of what to expect. Ryan was sitting up in bed, his face pale but his eyes bright. The moment he saw Ethan, he smiled weakly and lifted a hand. "You came," he said, his voice still tired but filled with gratitude. Ethan stepped closer, feeling a lump in his throat. "I had to," Ethan replied softly. "I just wanted to see how you're doing." Ryan looked at him for a long moment, then shook his head with a small laugh. "You could have won the game. You could have been the hero of the night. But instead, you gave it up, for me." "Why?" Ethan hesitated, then spoke honestly. "Because a trophy doesn't matter if someone's life is in danger. The game can be played again, but you couldn't be replaced. In that moment, there was no choice for me." It just felt like the right thing to do. Ryan's eyes grew misty. He reached out, and Ethan took his hand. "Thank you," Ryan whispered. "You didn't just save me. You showed me what it really means to care. I'll never forget this." The two boys, once fierce rivals, sat together in silence for a while, the weight of years of competition suddenly feeling small compared to the bond being formed in that hospital room. Their rivalry had pushed them to their limits, but now it seemed to have given birth to something stronger: respect, and perhaps even friendship. When Ryan was finally released from the hospital, the town welcomed him warmly. The first time he walked back into school, the halls erupted in cheers. And standing right beside him was Ethan, no longer just a rival, but a companion who had proven what it meant to put another person above the game. Together, they walked through the hallways, their shoulders brushing, their rivalry transformed into a story of loyalty and humanity. The local newspaper ran a feature titled, "The Shot He Never Took," with Ethan and Ryan pictured side by side. The story spread beyond the town, reaching nearby cities and even catching the attention of regional news. Letters poured in, written by strangers who said they were inspired by what Ethan had done. Teachers from other schools shared the story with their students, athletes from other towns spoke about it in their locker rooms, and families used it as an example of the values they hoped to pass on to their children. Ethan struggled at first with all the attention. He never thought of himself as a hero, and he often told people, "I only did what anyone should do." But deep down, he began to understand something important: sometimes doing the right thing isn't the easy choice, and not everyone would have made it. His action had stood out because it showed courage, and courage was something people always admired. Over time, Ethan and Ryan began training together. What had once been a rivalry turned into a partnership. They pushed each other just as hard as before, but now there was laughter mixed with the competition. Their teammates noticed the change, and the whole team grew stronger because of it. When the next season began, the energy on the court was different. It wasn't about proving who was better anymore. It was about lifting each other up, about teamwork, and about remembering what truly mattered. The town, too, remembered. Every time a new game was played in that gymnasium, someone would mention Ethan's choice. Parents would point to the spot on the court where he had dropped the ball and say to their children, "That's where he showed us what really counts." The story became part of the town's identity, told again and again until it felt like a legend. Years later, when Ethan looked back, he realized that the applause, the articles, and the praise had all faded with time, but the impact of that one moment had not. People still talked about it, not because of basketball, but because it reminded them of kindness, bravery, and humanity. And to Ethan, that was worth more than any championship. Ryan never forgot either. Whenever he looked at Ethan, he remembered the boy who chose compassion over glory. Their bond stayed strong, a reminder that sometimes the greatest victories are not written on a scoreboard but in the choices we make when no one expects us to. The whole town saw Ethan differently now. He was not just the boy who could make the winning shot. He was the boy who had taught them all a lesson, that true victory is found not in trophies or cheers, but in the courage to care for others when it matters most. And because of that, his story lived on, not as a tale of loss, but as a legacy of what it means to be human.